If you're watching this video, chances are you have a tablet, but unfortunately you do not have a case. Now, of course, tablets are very expensive, so you probably spent a lot of money on that tablet, and you have no money for a case. Well, I'm going to show you how to make a very inexpensive case for your tablet that I think everyone will love, and it only costs about $1 to make.
So for this project, you'll need a few different items. You'll need some cardboard or some old magazines, a ruler, some scissors, a pencil, a razor blade, a piece of paper, some glue, and of course a hardbound book.
Now, of course, selecting that hardbound book is a very important item because it becomes the case. And when we get to that step, I'm going to show you some important things to look for when you are trying to select a book. So if you don't have one right now, just wait until that step so you know exactly what you're looking for. So for the first step of this project, we need to get the dimensions of the tablet. Now, if you have your tablet handy, you could just take your ruler and go ahead and measure the length and the width of it and go ahead and write it down. Now, fortunately, most manufacturers will post the dimensions of these tablets online so you can easily just grab it from there. And it is a good idea to write this down. So the tablet I'm using right now is about 9.5 long by about 7 5/16 wide. Now, it's also good to note how thick it is, but we probably won't need that until one of the later steps. So I'm just going to go ahead and write it down, 3/8 thick, so I can have it around for later. For the second step, we're going to use these dimensions to basically make a template of our tablet. Okay? So I'm going to use my ruler here and measure out my piece of paper so that it is 9.5 inches long. And what I do is I make one mark on one side, make another mark at 9.5 inches on the other side, and of course we can draw a line. Okay? So this will measure out the length. Now let's do the width. So this one is 7 5/16. Make a mark. 7 5/16. Make a mark and make a nice thick line. So with this template that we've measured out, go ahead and take your scissors and cut it. Make sure that you're fairly straight along these lines, because later we'll have to trace this out and we want to make sure that it's nice and accurate. Now when you get it cut out, go ahead and take your tablet and just make sure that it does fit the dimensions correctly. If you make a mistake in measurement, now's a good time to fix it rather than when we start cutting our book. Alright, this guy looks good. One good thing that you can do with your template right now is basically mark it for all the types of buttons and ports that you have on your tablet. This will make cutting much easier later on. On the bottom of my tablet, I have this little port that's used for charging and, say, uploading files. So I want to mark this on my template so I know exactly where it is. So I've laid down the tablet onto my little template, and I can see my little ports down here. I'm going to make two little marks on where it is. Now, I'm making these marks actually wider than the port. That way, you know, I'll be able to basically plug it in and take that plug out without worrying about it bumping into the edges. This tablet also has some controls for volume on the right side, and near the top it has some controls to put it to sleep and even for a headphone jack. So I definitely want to mark these out as well. So again, I'll lay the tablet on my template here and then mark out some spots that are even wider than the buttons so I can cut those out later. Alright, so there's our template, and we got all of these little marks so I know where to cut. Now comes a very important step, selecting the book that will become the case of the tablet. Okay? So what I like to do is go down to my local thrift store and basically browse their used book section. It's kind of nice to pick out a good plain book that when you open it up
has a lot of color on the inside. So you can see that this one's kind of a dull brown with some nice flowers, but on the inside I got this lovely orange. These usually make some really nice cases. Now when you go searching for books, go ahead and bring your template along so you can see if the pages are wide enough to fit that tablet inside. You want to make sure that it has a good border, and also you want to make sure that the pages are thick enough to compensate for that tablet. So mine's about, let's say, 1/3 of an inch, and if I measure these, I can see that these are, sure enough, about 1/3 of an inch. Now the pages will actually expand a little bit when we get to the gluing part, but it's good to measure it out now to know that we have a little bit of wiggle room. Some other things to note when selecting this book is the quality of the pages. So you want to make sure that they're not too yellow, or definitely make sure that they're not warped of any sort. So the book I've selected here looks like the pages are in great shape. The case itself seems very sturdy. It's nice and straight. Also check the binding near the top to see if it is sewn in. A lot of hardbound books actually will sew in the spine, and that makes them extra durable. This particular one is just glued in, which isn't a problem. It just means that it may separate from that spine over time. Alright, in this next step, it's time to get cutting. But first, go ahead and take some of that cardboard or those old magazines and lay them down. You definitely want to protect the surface that you'll be working on. Then go ahead and grab your book and open up the front page and the back page so you have just the pages selected, and kind of pull everything back. There we go. Now go ahead and grab your template and lay it right on that book. Now you want to kind of center your template so that it's in the middle, and I find that most of the time you can eyeball this, but if you want to be really accurate, you could grab your ruler and make sure that it's evenly spaced all the way around. Now with your pencil, go ahead and trace around this template so you know exactly where to cut. Now when you take away your template, you see that you have this nice rectangle that we're going to go ahead and cut out. Now this is also a good time, as long as we have our template here, to go ahead and mark out all of those different ports that we'll cut out. Now you do want to make sure that these end up to be nice and straight, so use your ruler to go ahead and mark out these places as well. Now that we have this rectangle all marked out, we basically need to start making our cuts. Now this first cut is extremely important because it will be a guide for all the rest of the cuts we make later. That means I'm actually going to use my ruler to help out. So I'm going to put it along my first line here on the edge, and then take my razor blade. As long as it's nice and straight. There we go, so it's very faint, but you can see that I definitely did cut into the page. I'm going to make another one along the bottom, and along this side, and then along the top. There we go, so I've basically cut around all the edges, and you can see that this basically comes out very nicely. Now go ahead and save this colored piece of paper. You never know when you need to touch it up a little bit later on. Now as I go to make subsequent cuts, I'll go ahead and use that first cut as a guide. And I'll try and make these a little bit deeper as I go along. Now to make sure that these corners end up as nice sharp corners, it's good to start at the corner and then cut into one side, then maybe start at the other corner and again cut to the middle. That way they end up nice and sharp. So as I make this next series of cuts, I still want them to be fairly straight, so I'm going to use my ruler again, but this time I'm going to cut much deeper. Now be careful as you're making this cut. You don't want to wander off too far and end up cutting this lovely colored paper that we have here. I'm going to start at the corner, use a fair amount of pressure, cut all the way to the middle. Now I'm going to kind of flip this around, start at the other corner and again cut to the middle with a fairly deep cut. Now I've gone ahead and made those same deep cuts along the top, the side, and the bottom. And as you start to make these much deeper cuts, the pages will start to basically free themselves and you can start pulling them out. Now as you do get deeper into the book, you'll get more of an edge around the outside that you can use as a guide, so you'll have to stop using your ruler at some point. So I'm about halfway through the cutting process, and you can see that the book is definitely getting a lip around the outside, which makes it an easy guide as I start to make more of these cuts. I'm only about halfway through, so I have to keep going until I get all the way through, all the way until I get to the back. Alright, so I've used that razor blade, and I've cut all the way through the back. At this point, you can go ahead and flip it back to its normal position, and basically grab your tablet and see if it'll fit in here. Now what you're looking for is to make some small adjustments and make sure that it really does fit. Looks like I might have to take off a little bit more on this side because it's kind of rubbing against the edge. But it's really easy to do it now before I actually glue all the pages. So I trimmed away a little bit of that excess paper here on the right, test fitted it, and looks like it's going to work out nicely. This next step, what I want to do is basically start securing all of these pages. So to start out, I'm basically going to make a real thin pencil line around the inside of all of these cuts. Now the reason for doing that is when you go all the way to the back page, you can see an outline of where those pages are going to be. So taking your glue, we're going to basically run a bead out all along this edge. Now be careful, remember some of these places are going to get cut out later. So I'm not going to put a bead of glue during those spots, but I will secure everything else. Now that'll only secure basically the back page. We also want to be able to make sure that all of these pages stick together. So what I'm going to do is basically run some glue along all the edges so that they all stick together. Now the easiest way I find to do this is to basically close the book and then run a nice thin bead of glue and use your finger to spread it out. Now you don't want to put this on too thick because that'll create the pages to warp just a little bit. But you do want to get enough glue on there that it will start to stick. There we go. Now if you get a little bit on the front here, you don't want it to stick to the cover, so make sure you wipe that off. That way we'll be able to open the book when we're all done. Once you go ahead and you glue around all the outside and you smooth it out as best you can, again, make sure that you don't have any glue sticking out on the top because now we're going to shut the book. Now, this glue is going to sit here and dry and you don't want the pages to warp and get all wavy. So at this point, find yourself something very heavy and basically just place it on top of the book. Alright? Now, just go ahead and let that sit for about an hour as the glue makes it nice and hard around the outside. Now that the book has basically dried for about an hour, you can take off your weight and inspect the book. What you want to first is maybe pry it open nice and carefully to make sure that it didn't stick to the top cover here, and check to make sure that the pages are starting to be nice and secure. Now eventually we will apply more layers of glue to say the inside and the outside to even reinforce them more, but at this stage it's a good time to start cutting out these little inlets for your controls so you can access the tablet once it's inside. To make these type of cuts, you basically put your razor blade right on the line and then rock it back and forth so it digs in. Now you probably won't be able to go all the way down to the bottom, but you will be able to make a pretty good indent. Then do the same thing on the other side, really stab it in there, rock it back and forth, and get some more depth. Now as you get deeper and deeper into these cuts right here, you want to be careful not to actually mar the back cover. So be careful, as you get really close to the end to make smaller and smaller cuts so that you don't accidentally scratch it. As you can see, I've gone through and I've basically cut out a notch for each of our little ports here, and that line that I drew earlier is starting to show up. So I'm basically just going to take my eraser here and get rid of that line. Now that we've gotten rid of a bunch of those extra lines, you can see the case is starting to look really good. Unfortunately, the sides here that will hold it aren't quite as secure as we need them to. So what we're basically going to do is smear glue on the insides of all of these pages, as well as give the outside another good coating. Alright. Now once you get that glue all around the inside and another good layer on the outside, it's time to let it dry again. Of course, you don't want the pages to warp too much, so go ahead and just shut the book, grab something heavy, and let it sit for, say, about another hour or so. Alright, I think it's done. So it's gone through a few different drawing cycles now, and if you open it up you can see that the pages are now very secure, and basically you have your case all finished. So now might be a good time to go ahead and grab your tablet and give it one good test fit to make sure all the ports are accessible and you can see how it holds it in there. Now if you want to take this project even further, there's a few things you can do to the case to make sure that it definitely holds it nice and secure. You could visit like your local craft store and get like a latch to make sure that it stays shut. They're made out of Velcro, or you can use some nice buttons. You could also use some Velcro on the inside here, and that would help secure it. Now those are pretty good ideas for the cases, and ones that you definitely want to consider using. One reason is that sometimes, since this could open and shut easily, you might have your tablet slip out if it's not very secure. So if you hold it by the spine on one end, it could slip out. If you don't want to do anything like that, then I definitely recommend holding it by the side where the pages are, and then it usually stays pretty secure. And there you go, your tablet case is basically done, and you have a wonderful product that you can just leave on your coffee table and no one even really knows what it is. If you have any other questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, thanks for watching.